We are a couple of days away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and today I want to give you guys my 12 ranked offensive tackles going into this class. As you guys know, this is probably one of the deepest tackle classes we've seen in a number of years, and there's guys I think that are being overlooked a little bit. I think there's guys that are also overvalued, and today we're going to get into this list. I'm very excited to kind of share with you guys how I value some of these guys based off of watching their tape. Let's just jump right into this. Now, first and foremost, before we get into the 12th ranked offensive tackle, do note that there are a couple of guys I have ranked as guards as opposed to tackles, so you actually won't see them on this list. Troy Fautanu is one of my offensive lineman guys that I absolutely love. Think he's going to be a great offensive lineman in the NFL, but I don't think he's actually going to play guard. I don't think he's going to actually play tackle at the next level. So I'm actually going to go ahead and rank him as a guard. So you won't see him on this list. His teammate, Roger Rosengarten, also a right tackle for Washington, is also not going to be ranked on this list. To me, he's a guard as well. He's just not athletic enough. He's not long enough. For me, at least. Finally, KT Levinson is a left tackle at Kansas State. I think the guy has the upside to become Tyler Smith good, right? Like he has it, right? You can see it in his tape. The guy's from an advanced perspective can do all the things. He's strong as hell. He's physical. He's tough. To me, KT Levinson's one of those guys that, although he played left tackle, I think he'll be a better guard in the NFL. And I think he was playing out of position as well at Kansas State. But he's another guy that you won't see on this list. And I think a lot of people probably wouldn't rank him as a top 12 tackle anyways. But I really like KT Levinson, so I just kind of had to throw that out there. Let's get into it. Let's get into the official list starting at number 12. One of my favorite offensive line coaches, and honestly on planet Earth, is Bill Bedenbaugh of Oklahoma. The guy's produced some good offensive linemen, and I think Oklahoma has a really solid left tackle. That is Walter Rouse. Coming in at number 12 is Walter Rouse. Very well coached. You can see it in his technique. You can see it in the way the guy pass blocks, the way the guy run blocks. He understands body positioning. He understands the proper steps he has to take. So, you'll see this guy on zone runs to the left. He'll take all the proper stance. Or he'll take all the proper steps, right? Right foot will come back first as he kind of blocks out towards his left. Keep in mind he's a left tackle. Everything about this guy is just very good. Now, of course, the upside, we don't really know what it could be. He's not the most athletic guy out there. He's probably not the strongest guy out there either, but he is well coached. He knows what he's doing when it comes to playing offensive line. So we have him ranked as the 12th best tackle in this class. Jumping forward to number 11, we got Jordan Morgan, who, in my opinion, is such a phenomenal football player. And he did come back from an ACL injury this past season. A lot of people kind of overlooked that a little bit, especially as an offensive lineman. It does slow you down a little bit. Jordan Morgan, to me, is ranked 11th solely based off of the fact that he is on the slower side a little bit to me. And I think, if he didn't have that ACL injury, I think he may have ultimately ranked higher. But I don't know how much quicker can this guy actually be, right? In 2022, his tape wasn't as good. And then he tore his ACL in November. He did come back. He played all, I believe, 12 games this past season at left tackle for Arizona. The guy had a really solid season, but we're also not sure how quick he can get. And we're also not sure if he's actually going to even be a tackle in the NFL. His arm length is in the 9th percentile. So right away, the guy could struggle with length. And it is something we saw on his tape from this past season. There were plays where the guy did struggle at times to be able to really get his hands out there on guys and really be able to shut it down. And again, I think Jordan Morgan, the upside's there, but the ACL injury is a concern for me at least, because I don't know how long it's going to take for him to be 100%. And what is 100%, right? So one of the things that I saw with Morgan this past season was sometimes he'd get out in space. And I believe it was the Ole Miss game that I watched. He would get out in space and then he would struggle to be able to really handle guys in one-on-one in space, right? So he has to get out there. He has to close the distance on a wide 9 or whatever it is. And he struggles a little bit at times. But don't get me wrong. The guy's very explosive. He has a really good pop right out of his stance. He hits his landmark well. But again, it's once he actually gets to the top of his pass set, as he gets in space, can he do it, right? And we'll see, especially at the NFL level, will he be able to handle that speed? Some guys are powerful. I think he handles power pretty well. But it's going to really come down to, is he long enough? Is he quick enough? And where's his recovery? Morgan's also one of those guys that, if he didn't have the ACL injury, I'm pretty sure we would know more about him in terms of where he's kind of ranked. And I do think he'd be a lot higher on this list. So Jordan Morgan comes in at number 11. At number 10, we have a guy in Patrick Paul who has massive, massive, massive upside. Patrick Paul is 6'8", 331, 36 and a quarter arm length, right? His reach is incredible. There's not a lot of guys longer and bigger than Patrick Paul. The guy, to me, man, when he gets his hands on someone, he stays attached to that person. Great ability to latch. He mirrors pretty well as well. I do think that for being 6'8", 331, he's pretty athletic for that size. But, when you compare him to, let's say, a Olu Fashanu or a Joe Alt, he's not as athletic as those guys. And I think with that, that's going to be one of his Achilles heels as he gets into the NFL. Is Patrick Paul quick enough? Is he fast enough as he's in the NFL? I do think that the one thing with Patrick Paul, again, similar to Jordan Morgan, is you put him in space and they struggle a little bit. I think Patrick Paul does struggle a little bit more than Jordan Morgan does. I think with Morgan, it's more so maybe he's not long enough, so he leans a little bit at times. With Patrick Paul, he's just on the slower side, right? So there's plays where he'll try punching someone or whatever, and he'll just kind of miss. The punch sometimes doesn't land where it needs to land. Sometimes he'll misjudge exactly where he needs to hit a guy. And those are coaching points that you can get out, right? So I think Patrick Paul does have a ceiling as well. But at the moment, we have him ranked 10th, which is kind of crazy because I think a lot of people would put Patrick Paul in probably the top 5 or 6. But we have him ranked at 10th. And I think as we kind of go through it, you guys will see why he's ranked, where he's essentially ranked. Now, I do want to also state this, right? 6'8", 331. I think he's going to end up going higher than people realize because of that pure size, the athleticism he has. Patrick Paul's an interesting player. We'll see what ends up actually happening with him. He has pretty good tape. But obviously, I think, as an offensive tackle, you got to be athletic, right? Otherwise, you get guys like Orlando Brown or Trent Brown. And that's not necessarily bad, but those guys lose, right? And if you put someone that's fast or quick on them, they're more prone to giving up pressure. At number 9, we got a guy that I think is being super, super, super undervalued. You got a tackle coming out of Penn State. This is Caedan Wallace, obviously not Olu Fashanu. At number 9, we got Caedan Wallace, phenomenal pass blocker. He may be the best pass blocker in this class. Or maybe he might be number 2 to his teammate, left tackle Olu Fashanu at Penn State. But Caedan Wallace, man, this guy's ability to pass block is really, really good. Arm length in the 46th percentile. He's 6'6", so he has good size. I think he's a true tackle in the NFL. He's probably a true right tackle as well because the guy's played 40 starts at that right tackle position. So when I look at Caedan Wallace, he checks all the boxes. The guy's going to be a really, really solid football player at the next level. I think the one question mark with Wallace is really going to just be, he is athletic. I think his testing numbers back that up. I think the one question with Wallace will be as he gets into the NFL, does he handle power and speed? And is he able to handle those things well, right? And I say that because on tape, one of the things you'll see with him is not only does he anchor really well in pass pro, but he recovers really, really, really well. And in college, recovering means you initially lost the snap, right? So Caedan Wallace may get into his pass set. He may hit, his 45-degree pass set. He may get vertical and he'll hit his landmark. And a guy may jump to the inside and initially he may lose. But he recovers well. He'll hit him with the left hand. He'll get right in front of it. Footwork's phenomenal to get in front of it. But in the NFL, recovering in college, in the NFL, it's not as easy, right? Because now you're playing against NFL caliber players versus if you're at Penn State, you're not playing the same type of talent, right? So with Caedan Wallace, I think the big question mark will be, if he's in a bad spot, how does he recover, right? And is he able to do it the same way he did at Penn State? I'll be honest with you guys. I watched Caedan Wallace and his tape is probably better than a lot of other guys, right? You can watch Caedan Wallace's tape and his tape is obviously, to me, better than guys like Jordan Morgan and Patrick Paul. Obviously, that's why I have them ranked higher. But even a guy like Amarius Mims, who we have ranked just one pick ahead of Caedan Wallace. We have Amarius Mims at 8. We'll talk about him here in a second. Honestly, Caedan Wallace is probably better tape than Amarius Mims, right? I think with Mims, the upside is probably the highest in the class. But I love Caedan Wallace's tape. The guy's a very, very good football player. You see it right away. Number 9, Caedan Wallace, Penn State right tackle. I think he's going to be, if you get a guy in like round 2, 3, or 4, which is where I think Caedan Wallace ultimately ends up, he's going to be the one guy that's going to play for like 15 years, right? That's my prediction of this guy. Then at number 8, as you guys know, we got Amarius Mims coming out of Georgia. This is a lot lower than I think what a lot of people ultimately have Mims. I know some people are going to put Mims in their like top 3 or 4. Early on in the process, I was very, very high on Mims. But as I watch more of this guy's tape, you realize that there's definitely some struggles with Mims. I watch Patrick Paul, and Patrick Paul, he gets in space and he'll miss his punches, he'll miss his timing. I think Amarius Mims is worse than Patrick Paul in space. I think Mims really, really, really struggles in space. And I think that's going to ultimately end up costing Mims into even having a career where he can actually play. Like, there's a chance that Amarius Mims is going to just straight up bust out in the NFL. But there's also the upside to Mims, right? Which is he's 6'8", 330 pounds, crazy wingspan. I believe his wingspan was like, there's only 2 NBA players that, I think it was a stat, there's only 2 NBA players that had a longer wingspan than Mims did, right? Current NBA players. So it kind of shows you how lengthy this guy actually is. And that's going to benefit him because when you're going up against, if it's a speed rusher, a guy can make a move. And if Mims is just standing still, a guy can go outside or inside. That guy's going to have all this movement that he's ultimately going to try to do to get around Mims. And because this guy's wingspan so long, it doesn't really matter. He can let that defensive end make his move and he can hit him with the right hand. Let that defense go inside. He can hit him with the left hand. Depending on where he ultimately ends up playing. Mims has major upside, right? His upside is he could be the next Hall of Fame caliber offensive tackle. But I always say this with guys who, they need to develop as they get into the NFL. I always say this with these guys, that they're probably not going to develop, right? Chances are, if you're a guy that has to develop, chances are you're not going to develop. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Mims ends up going like the 3rd round in this draft. Not that, he's probably not. I think teams are too in love with like the upside of guys. It's probably why we get so many general managers fired every other cycle. It's a reason why we get so many busts that ultimately end up getting picked. But if I'm drafting, I'm not taking Mims in the first 2 rounds. Never mind the fact that this guy has a massive injury risk factor to him. But, if you take Mims, pick 22, for example, he may never stay healthy, right? And I think you have to factor that in when you're taking an offensive tackle. Plus, I think he's on the slower side, right? So with that, I'm staying away from Mims. Maybe I'll take him in the bottom half of the 2nd round. But ultimately, I don't think it makes sense for teams to take him unless they really think, we can have Jeff Stoutland or Bill Callahan really teach this guy and get him up to strength. And I should also just mention this. There's been rumors and reports that Mims was hurt the entirety of this past season, and the injury should have forced him to sit out. But apparently Georgia wanted to have him play, and he decided to do it anyways. Either way, I think there's a risk with Amarius Mims, but the upside is also there as well. So just kind of do with that as you will. I have him ranked as number 8. There's 7 guys that I think will have better careers than Mims. Of course, I think some of the other guys, even below Mims, will have better careers. But Mims also has that upside, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. Let's get into number 7. We got Notre Dame right tackle Blake Fisher. I think, we got Olu Fashanu and Joe Alt. We got Tyler Guyton. We got these guys that are, they're top 20 picks. And they're the guys for their offensive line. But then we got guys on the opposite side of them, right? Walter Rouse was 12th on this list. Caedan Wallace was 9th on this list. And those 2 guys are opposite of Guyton and Fashanu. Joe Alt also has a guy opposite of him that I think is going to go way higher than people realize. And that's going to be Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher, to me, from a tape perspective, is, he's being overlooked at the moment. I think Blake Fisher has a real shot to go in the 1st round. If we get 5 or 6 offensive tackles taken, Blake Fisher's going to be right there as a guy that's going to end up getting drafted. When I watch Blake Fisher's tape, the tape does not lie with Fisher. He's 6'5" and 3/4. He's 310 pounds. He moves really, really well. Pass pro, he anchors really well. Run blocking, he understands the angles he has to take. He understands the body positioning, hand placement. Everything about it is phenomenal. I think the athleticism is one thing that people will question a little bit with Blake Fisher. But I think he's athletic enough where he will be a successful player at that next level. I was watching Joe Walt's tape early on in the process, and Fisher, he just flashed. He just kept flashing, play in, play out. There's plays where this guy's moving out in space. He's just crushing corners and safeties and linebackers. He's putting them down. He's physical. Blake Fisher, in my opinion, should go in the first round. I'd be surprised if he ends up not going in the first. And if he doesn't go in the first, he has to go in the top 15. I'd be very, very, very shocked if the second round comes and we're at pick 47 or 48 and Blake Fisher has not been picked. The guy has the potential to become an elite tackle in the NFL. Number 6, we got Kingsley Suamataia coming out of BYU. Fantastic football player as well. I watched his tape a little late. I actually did not have a lot of BYU tape early on. I got that, I'd say, about 4 weeks ago, and we put the tape on. We even did a film breakdown on the Football Scout channel. Suamataia, in my opinion, has the upside to be a very good football player. Now, he's long. His reach is in the 58th percentile. He's long as hell. Some people think he will actually be a guard at the next level. I'm not 100% sure if I agree with that. You know, when you look at offensive tackles and say, are they guard or tackle at the next level, there's two things to look at. The first will be the height. The second will be the arm length, right? The reach that these guys have. Those are the two main factors to look at. And then you can get into things like, you know, their tape, their strength, ability to anchor, and those type of things. But Kingsley Suamataia, he checks out everything, right? The only question mark is going to be his height. That'll be the only thing people question. But I think he can definitely be a starting left tackle or right tackle in the NFL. I think he's going to end up being a first-round pick. And I know sometimes, you know, names sound similar on certain guys. You know, you got a Yale guy, Karen, that some people kind of, you know, factor in with Kingsley Suamataia. They're completely different players. To me, the Yale guy is a 5th-round pick. Kingsley Suamataia, I think, is a first-round prospect. I wouldn't be surprised if he falls out of the first and goes into the second. And I also wouldn't be completely shocked if teams actually value him as a guard and then he doesn't get picked until a little bit later. But if he's valued as a tackle by even 1 or 2 teams, he's going to end up going in the top 45 picks. Kingsley Suamataia, I think, is going to be one guy that's going to actually go higher than what people realize. Number 5, and I think the top 5 guys, you guys can already probably put it together, but the order will surprise some of you guys. At number 5, we got J.C. Latham coming out of Alabama. One of the guys that I think has so much upside. And I know some people have actually stated, I know that franchise guy, for example, a friend of mine, actually stated he thinks J.C. Latham can actually bust out. He has like the highest potential to be a bust. I don't necessarily agree with him on that. I do think Latham does have some bust factors, but I don't think he's going to bust out. I think Latham has, he has legit upside, right? You can see it on his tape. The only thing he really struggles with is sometimes he struggles with speed. Sometimes his footwork's off a little bit, but generally speaking, he's very, very strong. He's a dominating run blocker. He's probably the best run blocker. It's probably between him and Alt. Dominant run blocker, right? And even more so than that, he doesn't really struggle even in pass pro. Like his anchor ability, the strength he has, all of it checks out. Honestly, J.C. Latham, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being one of the top 2 tackles taken. And he has a very successful NFL career. Now, I obviously have him ranked 5. You guys will find out as we kind of go through the rest of this list. But I really like J.C. Latham. I think he has massive upside. I think the guy does everything right. And he only has one flaw, which is a coachable flaw as well. You know, Latham's one of those guys that I really, really like. At number 4, we got Taliese Fuaga. Fantastic player coming out of Oregon State. One of the interesting things is we've got a lot of like guys that are playing right tackle. They're going to end up going kind of high, right? So J.C. Latham is a right tackle. Taliese Fuaga is also a right tackle. And Fuaga, to me, when you put his tape on, kind of reminds me a lot of Darnell Wright. We saw Wright come out last year. Wright was my number 1 offense tackle coming out last year. He was actually my number 1 overall offensive lineman coming out last year. He was the 10th overall pick. Some people thought Wright was a 2nd-round prospect, and he ended up going 10th overall to the Chicago Bears, and he had a really solid rookie season. When I watch Taliese Fuaga, he reminds me so much of Darnell Wright. The one difference is I think Fuaga's more aggressive with his approach, and I also think Darnell Wright may have a little bit better technique, specifically in pass pro. But Fuaga can do it all, right? He'll slingshot against in run blocking. When he down blocks or reaches, all of it is phenomenal. And don't get it confused. Don't think that nasty, mean streak that Fuaga has means he doesn't have good technique. The guy's a phenomenal run blocker. When it comes to reach blocking, he knows exactly where to place himself. He knows how to climb and all those things. So I got Taliese Fuaga at number 4. I think my number 3 guy is going to be the one guy that I'm a lot different than every other person out there. And number 3, we got Oklahoma right tackle Tyler Guyton. Let's talk about this one a little bit longer than some of the other guys we talked about. I'm a lot higher on Tyler Guyton than I think the average person is. When I watch Tyler Guyton's tape, the tape is clear as hell. This guy has arguably the best technique in this class. And again, he was coached by a great coach at Oklahoma, Bill Bedenbaugh. And when I watch Tyler Guyton's tape, man, it's phenomenal. And the one thing with Tyler Guyton that people don't realize is his tape actually hasn't been released for that long. We just got it a couple weeks ago, right? So what ends up happening is 99% of the draft community out there did not have the Tyler Guyton tape. Most people rely on the same 2 or 3 data sources out there for all 22 tape. And I know because I actively trade him and actively involved within that. Most people did not have the Oklahoma tape. So most people kind of overlooked Tyler Guyton a little bit, and they just kind of followed what the general consensus has been. And a lot of people are still kind of doing that, right? You guys can go and look at the general mock draft, and all of them will say Alt is number 1. Some will have like JC Latham or Fuaga number 2. Then comes Olu Fashanu, and it's the general same consensus. And then they'll have Jordan Morgan as like the 5 or 6 guy. They'll have Mims as like the 4 or 5 guy. My ranking's obviously different based off the tape that I've watched, right? And with Tyler Guyton, when I watched his tape, I was very, very, very impressed. And the thing you got to realize with Guyton is he's 6'8". He isn't 6'4". He isn't 6'5". The guy is 6'8", and he is more athletic than any other offensive lineman in this class. Olu Fashanu might be the only guy as athletic as Tyler Guyton, but Fashanu's like 2.5 inches shorter than Guyton, right? Tyler Guyton is massive. He's a massive, massive, massive human being. And he has great technique as well, right? And now Guyton does have one thing he struggles with sometimes, and that is he doesn't necessarily stick to blocks long enough. Sometimes he'll get a little lazy with blocks, and I think that's something that as he gets into the NFL, he'll have to get that mindset kind of coached out, but that's really not that big of a deal. Tyler Guyton, in my opinion, he's gonna end up actually going higher, I think, than what people realize. If I had to make one prediction, it might not happen, right? I'm not saying I know exactly what's going to happen. Tyler Guyton may end up being the 6th offensive tackle taken. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Guyton goes like 9th overall to the Chicago Bears, who need a tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu are the first tackle take. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Guyton is the 2nd tackle taken. Don't be surprised if that happens. I think Guyton's upside is a lot higher than all the other tackles. I think there's a real chance. And then let me back up here. Amarius Mims has the upside to become one of the best tackles. Tyler Guyton has upside to become one of the best tackles as well. But the difference between the guys is right now, Tyler Guyton's about here and Amarius Mims is way down here in terms of where they're at today, right? So both guys can get way up here, but Tyler Guyton's already a lot closer to that point. So for that reason, I have Tyler Guyton ranked a lot higher than not only Mims, but some of the other guys as well. I think Tyler Guyton's going to be such a great football player. And also, just to clarify, I don't think it's that Guyton needs to develop and that's where he's going to end up. He's a solid-ass football player. So I have Tyler Guyton ranked as my number 3 offensive tackle. At number 2, and this is also going to be different, I got Joe Alt as number 2, which leaves number 1. Olu Fashanu, and let's talk about that as well. I like Joe Alt. I like Olu Fashanu. Honestly, I almost put Tyler Guyton ahead of Joe Alt, and I'm not as high on Joe Alt as some other people are, and I want to kind of talk about why that's the case. When I watch tape of offensive tackles, one thing these guys need is they need to be athletic. If you're not an athletic tackle, because think about this. As a tackle, you have to be different than the centers and guards, right? Which is you have to have the arm reach, you have to have the length in your arms, you have to be tall as well, you have to be strong to take on power, and you also got to be quick and athletic to take on the speed guys, right? Because your right tackle is always going to be your right tackle, your left tackle is always going to be your left tackle. But a defense can swap guys out. You can put in Max Crosby on one end, you can swap him out with Malcolm Kuntz on the next snap. Then maybe you put in Montez Sweat, or maybe another defenseman that may be faster than Montez Sweat, right? Maybe it's like Dallas Turner or one of these other guys that the Bears may draft, right? As a tackle, you don't get to swap that out. You have to be able to kind of handle it all. And when I watch Joe Alt's tape, I think he's a great run blocker, arguably the best run blocker in this class. But when it comes to pass blocking, you can see the snaps on tape. He struggles at times. I also don't think he's very athletic. I think when he gets into the NFL, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get guys that are faster. You're going to get guys that are stronger. And I think Alt's going to struggle with that a little bit. Now, I do think he'll be a good football player, but I don't know if I would say he's, there's no bust potential, right? I wouldn't say that with Alt. And I also think at the moment he's being a little overvalued, because I think a lot of people are just throwing it out there that he's, the clear-cut number one tackle. He's a clear-cut best tackle prospect. Some people are saying he's the best non-quarterback, ahead of guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. I don't see that being fact, right? I think Joe Alt's upside is a little limited as well, right? Because I think what we've seen on tape so far is kind of where he's at. I made the prediction that I don't know if Joe Alt will be the first or even second tackle taken. I'll stick with that. I'm not 100% sure if he'll be that. If I'm a team drafting an offensive lineman, Olu Fashanu is the guy I'm taking. Olu Fashanu, in my opinion, is going to be the best tackle in this class from day one. Now, things may change in a year or two from now as guys develop, right? So you always got to keep in mind the team you go to obviously is going to make a big difference. You go to the Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to be a lot better than if you go to like the Jets. No offense to Jets fans. But just saying, you can go to the Raiders. You won't be as good as if you get together with Jeff Stoutland of the Eagles. Or if you go to the Titans, it's a great place to kind of go to now because you'll have Bill Callahan kind of coaching you up a little bit. And the Titans may be the team to take the very first offensive tackle. And I don't think Joe Alt's the type of person that Bill Callahan would want. I think Olu Fashanu is a better fit. That's why I think Olu Fashanu may be the first tackle taken. And we'll see what ends up happening. The Chargers pick as well, so we'll see what happens. But Olu Fashanu is my number one offensive tackle. I think the guy, when you look at his technique, very solid technique, very, very solid in pass pro, anchors really well. The footwork, everything about it is very clean and crisp. Some people have talked about his struggles, and people specifically will talk about the Ohio State game. The one thing to keep in mind with the Ohio State game is Ohio State has a really solid defensive end on one end. Also keep in mind, Olu Fashanu was actually hurt that game. If you guys watch the tape of that game versus the other games, he actually had his knee wrapped in that game. That was the only game he had his knee wrapped. And we've independently confirmed it. Not me personally, but people I know have independently confirmed that Olu Fashanu did have an injury in that game. And that was part of his struggles in that game. Regardless of that, he's put so much solid tape together over the past couple of seasons. I think Fashanu's going to end up being the best tackle in this class day one. I think Tyler Guyton has the most upside. I think he may end up being the best in like 3 or 4 years. Mims has that potential as well, but there you guys have it, man. There you guys have my top 12 ranked offensive tackles. I know it's going to be different than what a lot of people have kind of put out there, and I know some people aren't going to agree with it, and that's okay. All right, this ranking is solely based off of what I've watched and how I've watched guys, and it's also kind of based off of, what I've seen from tackles that have had success, right? We've seen guys like DeJuan Jones, who some people were saying is a first-round pick. We saw him slip a little bit, right? And a part of why he slipped was because teams value athleticism at the tackle position, which means guys like Amarius Mims could struggle a little bit in terms of where he gets picked, or he may fall a little bit, right? We also see guys that have had success in the league versus guys that have kind of busted out. We know what to look for. When you have Alex Leatherwood out there, you kind of know what to look for and what not to focus on when it comes to the actual draft. So I think my 12 rankings is going to be interesting to follow, and we will follow it I was looking at my 2023 rankings. We'll create an updated video on that as well. But let me know what you guys think, man. Who are your guys' top 5 or 12 if you really want to do 12 offensive tackles rank? Let me know in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.